Hello, 'tis I, Fat Cow. As many of you know, I have a chronic illness called fibromyalgia. It's not the only chronic illness I have, but it is the one that has the most impact on my life. Fibromyalgia is classified as a chronic illness, as all chronic illnesses are, because it's an illness that you will have for the rest of your life. There's no cure. It also comes under the umbrella of being an invisible illness, meaning that on first glance, when you look at me, you wouldn't realise that I was technically disabled. Fibromyalgia is also a dynamic disability, which basically means that my ability to do things changes daily, weekly, monthly, hourly. I don't know when I wake up in the morning my abilities, basically, which means my health is very, very unreliable and is one of the main reasons why I am technically unemployable. I could possibly work for 2 days straight, but on the third day I could be in so much pain or so fatigued I'm unable to go to work. I could do half a day and by the afternoon be in so much pain I can no longer work. I doubt very much realistically I could manage a full working week before having to take time off, but you get my point. I want to talk about my personal disability in terms of it coming under the umbrella of being an invisible illness. Quite a few chronic illnesses, quite a few disabilities are invisible. One could argue a lot of mental health disabilities are invisible. To the outside world, the person looks entirely healthy. Or do they? And this is my point. The fact of the matter is, yes, on first glance, I do not look disabled. But if you paid attention, is that the case? Would that be the case for most people with an invisible illness? Say, for example, you saw me in the supermarket. If you paid attention, let's say you watched me for a small period of time, you might notice I walk with a slight limp. You might also notice I do not stand up straight, not because my posture's bad per se, but because I'm actually physically unable to straighten my spine. My pelvis and lower spine, unfortunately, is riddled with osteoporosis and therefore is crumbling, let's say, in combination with the degeneration of my spine. I also have what is called paraspinal muscle contractions, which means that the muscles that surround my spine in my lower lumbar region, where the spine also happens to be extremely fragile, contract, and as a consequence have pushed my lower spine forwards. So the curvature of my back is slightly pronounced, as in when I stand barefooted, my spine tilts in the same way as somebody wearing very high heels. Spine and pelvis tilts forward. And that is me just standing flat on the ground. This is actually extremely painful. And in addition, the reason my muscles in my spine spasm is because of anxiety. As I'm beginning to get anxious, I start getting backache because of the spinal muscle spasms. So, in addition to the slight limp, my inability to stand straight, the fact I'm also slightly tipped to one side because of my spine and my hips, incidentally, because yes, the osteoporosis is also in my hips and my knees and my neck. In conjunction with the fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain condition, which means my body is in pain regardless of any other situation. My nervous system misinterprets everything and decides it's a pain. And taking painkillers, incidentally, I am prescribed the highest dose of cocodamol, which is a mixture of codeine, which belongs to the same family as morphine and heroin, by the way, and paracetamol. So I'm on the strongest prescription painkillers I can be given before I move on to morphine. And even then, it just reduces the pain. It doesn't eradicate the pain. Now, I was on the maximum dose for quite a long time, but I decided, well, that's not actually a very good thing to do. So I've managed to reduce my dose to less than half of the maximum dose I'm allowed to take and just grin and bear it. But suddenly, let's just add insult to injury, shall we? I've started the menopause. And what does the menopause do to healthy individuals? Well, it makes them feel tired and it makes your joints ache and it gives you hot flashes and sweats and it interrupts your sleep. Well, I have chronic fatigue because of my fibromyalgia, so I am always tired. I wake up tired. But now, thanks to hormones or lack thereof, I'm even more tired. I'm in even more pain. And now my body has decided, guess what we're going to do? We are going to make it physically impossible for you to lie down in any position whatsoever and not be in crippling pain. Lie on your back, your spine will hurt. Lie on your front, your spine will really hurt. Lie on your side, here, have a painful hip. Obviously, I'm a touch pissed off about this recent development because I thought I'd had a grip on things. Having had this chronic illness for 12 years, I'd gotten the hang of it. But now another thing has been added to the mix thanks to hormones, so that's great. So, yeah, I could go on HRT, yes, but there's a problem with that too. HRT can aggravate gallbladder attacks, which I've had 3 of and I don't intend to have again. And also the fact that I am white and a woman and overweight also adds to the increased chances of a gallbladder attack. So the other things I can't do anything about immediately. I can do something about the being overweight, well, actually obese, except that's a different subject altogether because all the invisible illnesses and disabilities and what have you make losing weight actually really difficult for me, but I'm trying. So I didn't want to add the hormones to the mix because the gallbladder attacks are seriously the most intense pain I've ever felt in my life. and I will do anything to avoid those. So yes, great. I deviated completely because I've gotten onto something that's kind of pissing me off at the moment. But another thing about chronic illnesses is you can't just have one chronic illness. You've got to have other stuff. And my other stuff, in addition to having fibromyalgia, is I have EDS. I am hypermobile. I am at the lowest end of the spectrum for this, but what do people with EDS suffer from? Joint pain. Well, I really needed that, didn't I? Considering my body misinterprets pain signals and amplifies them. And plus, my joints are disintegrating as well. That's great. And in addition to EDS, it's highly suspected I have POTS, because who doesn't want to get really, really fucking dizzy every time they stand up? And now, this year, I've gone into the effing menopause, which by all accounts is bad enough by itself when you're healthy. Anyway, that's not the point I was trying to make. I was trying to make that as an individual with an invisible illness, well, actually with quite a few invisible illnesses, on first glance, I look fine, but if you paid attention, I don't. I limp, I lean, and I cannot stand up straight. I also, and this is the kicker, sweat profusely when I'm anxious or I am being active. And I say active because there's only so much I can actually do. That is my least favourite of all the symptoms of my various chronic illnesses, because the chronic sweating is far from invisible. Far from invisible. I can be sweating profusely in the middle of winter in a snowstorm wearing just a jacket. Again, I think I am letting things out, let's say. So we've got the limp, the lean, the not standing up straight, the sweating, and then if you paid attention to the face, understandable if you don't, but if you did, you would notice the grimace of pain when I try to pick up stuff. If I have to bend down or reach up or move bags or whatever. If you paid attention, you would see I'm not exactly a healthy individual. And that's the thing with people with invisible illnesses. If you paid attention, you would know. Invisible illnesses aren't invisible because we show no symptoms whatsoever. They're invisible because nobody pays fucking attention. And yes, one day I can put my bin bags out with relative ease. And when I say relative ease, it means I can get the job done in one go, but it is excruciatingly painful and I will sweat a lot. Another time, I might have to do it in stages and I'm practically crawling by the end of it. That's what a dynamic disability is. Most of the time I walk completely unaided. Yes, quite slow. If you were paying attention, I am not a fast walker. I'm not even an average speed walker. I am a slow walker. But I can walk unaided for a certain duration or a certain distance. After that, the limp begins to appear. Some days I need a cane. And some days I don't leave the house because all I can manage is kind of stumbling from one item of furniture to the other to get round. Squid. Which brings me to another point that I forgot during my first ramble. Another reason invisible illnesses are invisible is because on our bad days, when things are very noticeable, we don't leave the house. You don't see us. The only time people with invisible illnesses are out in the wild is when they're having a good day. On our bad days, you don't see us at all. We don't go out. We can't go out. So there's that. If you saw me in my home, my illness would be more evident when I was doing housework. For example, I can wash about 2 or 3 dishes before it gets too painful. And you'd think standing at the sink is not really that big a deal. But because of the movement of your upper body from doing the dishes, picking them up and putting them to one side, the micro movement of my waist causes such pain to my spine. Additionally, I cannot sweep or vacuum a floor unless I do it on all fours. So, you get the vacuum that has the little, you can hold it in your hand, not on the thingy. And I sweep using a dustpan and brush on my knees because I cannot sweep standing up. So it's actually, my invisible illness isn't actually that invisible. Additionally, we, the people who have invisible disabilities, chronic illnesses, dynamic disabilities, learn to mask. If I pulled a face every time I was in pain, I wouldn't be pulling a normal face at all. If I made a noise every time something hurt, I'd probably sound like a porno movie of a gangbang. We mask the pain. We don't announce our pain or that we feel ill. And when somebody with these illnesses, things that come under the umbrella of these illnesses, say they feel sick or say they're in pain, you better believe they are really in pain and really feeling bad, because we only announce it when it is physically impossible to mask it anymore. So yes, there are people on the internet that are presenting things and say they are disabled, and everybody assumes they're lying because they seem perfectly normal. I'm sitting in a really large armchair. I sit in these chairs with my legs crossed off the floor or on one hip or in a myriad of positions, because if I sat on a normal office chair or the chair you have in a doctor's waiting room, in the very polite position of sitting upright, both feet on the floor, the pain I experience within minutes is excruciating. While I'm sat here, all crumbled up in my chair, in a position that takes my weight off directly my lower spine, and waving my hands around because I talk with my hands, my lower back feels like it's going to snap in half. And yet I don't display this because I'm used to it. Every time I move my neck, it sounds like I'm eating popping candy in my head, because I can hear the bones crunching As I go upstairs, I can physically hear, and other people can hear my knees crunching. So, yes, well, on face value, I look absolutely fine. I'm not, and nor are these other people. When I'm feeling particularly unwell, I get easily overwhelmed by noise. I startle very easily. The postman puts a letter through the door. It startles me. My child slams the car door shut a little too hard. It startles me. Somebody scares me a little bit when I'm driving. It startles me. My body goes cold and then I get a tingling pins and needles sensation. If I'm in the supermarket too long, my legs have actually gone numb. If I'm overwhelmed, say two people are talking to me at the same time and both asking me a question, my mind will completely blank. And when I'm especially not doing well, I start to stutter. It's like my brain buffers. So while, again, everything on the surface looks relatively okay for a woman of my size and age, it's not. And the fact of the matter is, there are millions and millions of people who are going through exactly the same thing, yet people are accusing them of exaggerating or being hypochondriacs or only doing it for attention because you're not paying enough attention. You choose not to see, and that's probably a message from my mother, who in herself, at the age of 88, has equally as many issues as I do. Bless her. So there's no real point now that I'm making because I've gone completely off tangent many, many times. Yes, no. The point is, invisible illnesses at the end of the day aren't nearly as invisible as you are led to believe. It just requires a certain degree of paying attention, taking notice, and empathy. There are millions of people like me. I've been dealing with this now for over 12 years. I, unfortunately, in my opinion, know what it's like to be healthy, which sounds like a really weird thing to say. Personally, I would have rather this had been my status quo from the start, and then I wouldn't have known how bad I am because I had nothing to compare it to. This is just my personal opinion. I'm not pointing fingers or making judgments about anybody else with any disabilities whatsoever. But the fact I was healthy, the fact I used to be somebody who went to the gym 6 days a week at 6 a.m. in the morning and ran for 45 minutes straight at like 6 or 7 or 8 kilometres an hour. Okay, with somebody who could carry their children on their shoulders and could play with their kids and keep their home nice and have a job, to somebody who cannot do anything without being in pain or always being tired. I would rather have had the ignorance of not knowing what healthy felt like. Now, with the added implications of going through the menopause and everything that that entails, and the fact I'm getting older, and by default things get more difficult as you get older. Things are very, very, very unlikely to get better for me. And I would consider myself blessed if this is as bad as it gets. What I'm trying to say is when somebody says something's wrong, maybe, just maybe, try not to be quite so dismissive straight away. Thank you.